The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Headline Washington Post sports section. No doubt about it. Okay, we've been burned before. We remember the start in 2008, the last time they were 4-1 and collapsed to 8-8. But that was Jim Zorn. We remember the 7-1 start in 1996 when they finished 9-7 and out of the playoffs. But that was with Gus Frerotte. That was with a defense that was absolutely terrible from time to time, especially when they allowed Boomer Esiason to throw for over 500 yards against them at RFK Stadium. This is different. Believe it. It's real. It's 100% real. And if you want to think about rookie quarterbacks, yes, there are the RG3 comparisons, no question about it. But RG3 started off 3-6, and we knew from the jump it was a temporary offense. They were just giving him training wheels until he could become a pocket passer. The offense that you see with Jayden Daniels right now is the offense, and he's refining it week by week. And yes, he ran 11 times yesterday, but if you notice, there were no slides. Every time he ran safely out of bounds, maybe once or twice in the middle of the field, but he's protecting himself, and most importantly, he is throwing a gorgeous long ball. And on what they said was a scramble play, the 67-yard pass to Terry McLaurin, which unfortunately resulted in a turnover, but that was a ball that couldn't have been placed much better. And the touchdown pass to De'Ami Brown, that was a thing of beauty, right in the bucket. And as you'll hear Jayden Daniels explain, he was the one that suggested the play. I didn't realize things could unfold this quickly. You don't get the sense while you're watching it on TV. But the play before, he ran out of bounds. And he said to Cliff Kingsbury, hey there, and man, let's take a deep shot. Kingsbury goes, fine. Dials it up. Boom. De'Ami Brown, who's only playing because of injury, Noah Brown can't play, so fine. And, all this Devontae Adams talk of dealing for him, no, not at this point. They got great chemistry, they got great feeling, and they got something that I didn't think would happen this quickly. Because, yes, they've been selling out the last 2 years. But the sellouts, if you've been to games, and I was last year at the Dolphin game, which was 75% Aqua in the stands, these were tickets that had gone to ticket brokers several years ago, and they were selling them off to the visiting team. Pretty much a green stadium for the Eagles, a blue stadium for the Giants. Well, yesterday was a burgundy stadium. Yes, it was. They announced attendance at 59,000, which was probably accurate. I think it only holds now about 63,000 as they've yanked out seat after seat after seat. But it was mostly full, and it was mostly full with burgundy and gold. And this is how Dan Quinn opened his news conference after the blowout victory, 34-13.
And I wanted to give a shout out to the fans. I thought the fan support tonight, it was awesome, and caused a couple of false starts and some use of timeouts. And so today, home field advantage helped the defense play better on third down. And so, own way, that was complimentary football. And but we felt that energy and support from the sideline. You could feel the energy that was brought. So that's the home field advantage that is such a big deal.
And he should not take this for granted. A coach who comes in to coach an NFL team figures in most cases going to have a sellout crowd for a home field advantage and rooting for the home team. And Dan Quinn had been an assistant in Seattle, which has maybe the best home field advantage in the NFL. He'd been a head coach in Atlanta, which has a brand spanking new stadium, which is gorgeous. I was there last year. It's a great place to play, and a dome stadium, which gets loud. And he's coached in Dallas, and they fill it up in Dallas because it's Jerry World, and they just want to be there. And the Cowboys are the most important thing in town. He hasn't been here for what has been a disaster. First, the mostly empty stadiums. There was a point where they were taking people who had standing room only tickets. And just to make it look a little better in the club section, you'd walk in and they exchange your standing room only seat for a club seat. You know, maybe you got in the door for like $10 and you're sitting in a seat that costs $200 or $300 per seat per game. That's how bad it was. And so for it to be loud like it was yesterday, and more importantly, mostly burgundy, wow. And people wearing Jayden Daniels jerseys. And, there's an interesting note about that in the Post today, by the way. I wasn't aware of this. Maybe you are. They talked about all the people that were wearing these number 5 jerseys, and it's been the highest seller on Fanatics in the last few weeks. And why not? He's an emerging star. But as Sam Fortier writes in this story, he says Daniels' jersey could become a symbol of the greater resurgence, not just a successful young quarterback, but everything around him. Many fans said that Daniels has their communities buzzing and that they're ready to buy back into the team that used to clear roads all over the DMV on Sunday. We had to refresh our jerseys and get some new ones for our family, Mom Kate Spiegler said, rocking a burgundy number 5. We originally bought Sam Howell jerseys for Christmas, but we never took them out of the box, 7th grader Hunter Schechter said. And right after the draft, he and his dad used the insurance policy at Fanatics to trade them in for Daniels jerseys. I didn't know that. I know you could do that at Fanatics. That's a great idea. That's what do you say? It's a bust-proof jersey? Now, maybe you have to do what they did and not take it out of the box. I don't know how that works, but that's a tremendous idea. I mean, look, my son, who's now 33 years old, let's see, he had a Gus Frerotte jersey. He had a Brad Johnson jersey. He had a Kwame Brown jersey. He had a Mitch Richmond jersey. And I had to talk him out of buying a Jaromir Jagr jersey with his own money. I said, I don't think he's going to be here for long. Unfortunately, I did. So to invest in a Jayden Daniels jersey and to be able to still wear it 5 years from now, that's a new concept here. And it's, I know Dan Quinn has some sense of it, but not a full sense of it, not having been here, that you could have a full stadium on a Sunday afternoon rooting for the home team at now, what is it, Northwest Stadium. I have to get used to saying that, not FedEx Field. I mean, that's a seemingly simple thing, but in many ways that's a remarkable thing given where this franchise has been. The other thing to look at, and we're going to spend a lot of time on the offense yesterday, even when he's having, as Quinn said, a grimy offensive day in the first half, they still hang 34 on the Browns and could have hung more. Jayden Daniels didn't even play the fourth quarter. That's a Cleveland team that offensively is a complete mess. The Deshaun Watson signing, oh, man. I mean, if Albert Haynesworth was on a scale of 1 to 10, an 8 bad, this is a 15 bad. This is unbelievable how much this is going to handicap the franchise because he's still due $180 million, and all of that counts against the cap. I mean, they can cut him loose, which, without the contract, they probably would have by now. They're saying, Kevin Stefanski said yesterday, they're not making a quarterback change. That's really because he can't. There's not much really he can do about this. They're stuck with him. But defensively, last 2 weeks, we have seen a big change. And some of it is related to Kyler Murray, the shrimp, trying to throw from the pocket, and an offense from Arizona that they were good enough yesterday to beat a reeling San Francisco team. But offensively, they're not that good. They do run the ball, and they did run the ball effectively against Washington. But this Cleveland team, it's an NFL team, but they got a quarterback who's a mess. And this defense right now, if they play anywhere close to that next week, now they're 6.5-point underdogs going to Baltimore on Sunday, but if they play close to it, they got a chance to win the game. I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout like this. It's not going to be like the last 3 weeks, but the Cincinnati game wasn't a blowout, but they scored a lot of points in that game. I think 38 points. So it's not going to be that. But this is indicative of how they can play, and they did a really good job with. They have some NFL top NFL quality receivers on that team. They really do. I mean, despite the fact that at this point Deshaun Watson looks like he's disinterested and he's absolutely terrible. They got Amari Cooper on that team. They have Jerry Jeudy, who was a big star at Alabama. I mean, they held Jeudy to one catch for 16 yards. Cooper caught 4 for 60. But by and large, that was an excellent effort by the defense, which really isn't that good, but was good enough yesterday. And Frankie Louvu had 2.5 sacks and also recovered a fumble. And even he says, we got another level besides this.
This game's not played by perfect men. There's a couple plays out there where if you guys go in the room with me and sit down and watch this film with me, man, there's plays out there, I can have the safety having my back on that. I missed a drop or missed a pick, and like I said, we're getting there. There's little things that's, in the way, but these are the stuff we're going to get over, and that's what I meant by, moving forward as a team.
And Dan and you guys talk a lot about playing complementary football. We've seen the offense and what they've been able to do. To see the defense and the offense really work in tandem today, just how much fun is that? Man, that's so much fun. That's how football's supposed to be played. Offense, they get a turnover. We come on a field, they have a field goal. Special team comes in, put us in a field position. Man, that's just football, and that's how it's supposed to be played.
So you got a home field again. You got a defense that's at least decent with room to grow. They couldn't find linebackers for years under Ron Rivera, Mr. Linebacker. Played on the Bears 85 championship team, maybe the greatest defense of all time. Could never find linebackers. They got 2 of them here, Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu. Now, some of it is that the team is now attractive to play for. I don't know if Bobby Wagner comes here if Ron Rivera is the coach. In fact, I'm pretty sure he doesn't. Frankie Louvu, more dysfunction by the Carolina Panthers. I don't know why they let him walk. He's been terrific since he's been here. And the defensive line, which had issues in the first few weeks and somewhat invisible, did a hell of a job yesterday. They really did. They did a good job stuffing the run. And whatever you want to say about Deshaun Watson, and all of it's true, they held a team to basically 3 points. I mean, the last 10 points that they got was pretty much garbage time. It was the 3 points that they held them to in the first half that really made the difference. I mean, they were completely dominating them at halftime when it was 24-3. I mean, that game was over at the half. How many times in recent years have you seen with this team a game that was over at the half? And Jayden Daniels, though his stats don't reach the incredible stats that he had in his first 4 weeks when he's completing 82% of his passes, still, I mean, these are great numbers. He completed 56% of his passes, threw for 238 yards, threw 2 great deep balls. He ran 11 times. Now, remember, first game, 16 times. Oh, my God, you can't do that. Now it's 11. Is there anybody who watched that game who thinks to himself, boy, he ran too much? He ran the right amount. He ran out of bounds all the time, and he ran for 82 yards. And the touchdown pass that he threw to De'Ami Brown was a thing of beauty. And if you watch any of the post-game shows throughout the networks last night and starting yesterday afternoon, you saw nothing but flowers thrown Jayden Daniels' way. This was the NBC crew. We have Jason Garrett, the former Cowboys coach, and you have Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. And well, you hear what Florio says about Daniels. And you also have on the set, who else was on there? I think Chris Sims was on there, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, this was this was one of the two brothers who played for the Patriots. Anyway, this is the NBC last night as they were getting set for the Sunday night game, and the analysis of what they saw from Jayden Daniels yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, I'm blown away by Jayden Daniels, just the level he's playing at. Really, to start his career, he hasn't been bad yet. And just 5 games into this thing, he looks like he's a 10-year vet. The guy that we're not talking enough about is Dan Quinn. Mm-hmm. I spent a day with them in OTAs, and the guys told me, coaches and players alike, said he didn't talk about football for the first 2 weeks when they got together in the offseason. It was all about getting connected, finding out who each other is, what made each other tick, go to work in the weight room. It wasn't about X's and O's, any of that stuff. It was about building a culture. Way overused. Everybody talks about culture, but that's what Dan Quinn's all about. Every place he's been, go back to Seattle as a defensive coordinator, what he did in Dallas as a defensive coordinator, that's what he's all about, kind of creating that spirit. Now, they drafted the right quarterback. Yep. The quarterback is making a huge difference there, but there's a lot of other positive things going on down there in Washington, and Dan Quinn has a lot to do with it.
When I talked to Jayden Daniels after the game, one of the things that struck me is it looks like when he runs, he still has a higher gear, and he believes he still does have a higher gear. So he's only going to get better. What he's done through 5 games is amazing. I don't know how they lost as badly as they did week 1 to the Buccaneers, but they forgot about that, and they've won 4 in a row. And I'm going to make you a believer in Jayden Daniels as an MVP candidate, because I heard what you said earlier.
I keep being like,
I know, but here's why. It's very simple. The quarterback of the number 1 seed in each conference, those are the 2 finalists. That's how it works. Unless somebody does something historic, it's going to be a quarterback from the 1 seed in the AFC or the 1 seed in the NFC. So they're 4-1. They keep winning. You have the Vikings and Lions maybe beat up on each other. If they emerge as the number 1 seed, he's going to be one of the finalists for MVP.
They have a shot. That division's not looking promising right now, even though the Giants got a good win. But overall, no one's dominating that division while Washington can't.
We're 5 games in. We got a long, long way to go. We're talking about who's winning the division. I mean,
we got to do this every week.
Yeah, it's going to be written 12 more times.
That's okay.
Guys, so let's not get too excited. I know. And I read your stuff every day.
Every day. We're all the way in.
It's stirring the pot.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Jayden one more time, though. The idea that the game is so slow for him at this age. I mean, think about Aaron Rodgers didn't play till the middle of year 4, right? I mean, Elway was not good early. I mean, you think about the greatest players ever to play, and for him to transition so smoothly, I mean, it's really amazing.
Jason Garrett, Devin McCourty, and Mike Florio on NBC last night. And you heard what Florio said. My God, about MVP, not Rookie of the Year, MVP. And he also threw out the term 1 seed. And yes, we've only played 5 games, and it's way too early to talk about seeding for the playoffs. But just looking at the NFC right now, Washington at 4-1 has the second best record in the conference behind Minnesota. And do you really believe in Sam Darnold? Darnold didn't look very good yesterday. Aaron Rodgers was worse in the London game, but I'm not a firm believer in Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings. Cowboys won last night, barely. There seems to be a lot of dysfunction on that team as well. There was a sideline incident between Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. There's some things happening there that aren't good. Philadelphia has looked terrible at time to time. They're 2-2 on the year. Atlanta's been winning by the skin of their skinny tin teeth. They're 3-2 on the year. Yeah, Tampa looked really good in beating Washington in week 1, but they're also 3-2. Is New Orleans any good at 2-2? Carolina is horrible. The best team in the conference is probably Detroit at 3-1. They didn't play yesterday. And then the Bears are coming a little bit. Is Green Bay really a good team at 3-2? I think at the very worst right now, if you had to look at the power rankings of the NFC, who's the best team, you put Detroit at 1. But I don't think you have to go past maybe 4, 5 at the lowest in the NFC for Washington. And that's with a quarterback who's getting better week by week by week. I mean, it's really something to think about. How bad is Deshaun Watson? How much of a mess is this in Cleveland? We'll get to that. Plus, Kirk Cousins with some very, I want to say, leave it to Beaver stuff as he was on the Dan Patrick Show last week. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Yeah, I mentioned in the update that the Caps are opening the season at home against New Jersey, and just a thought occurred to me. The Commanders play the next day. It's a Saturday night game here in D.C., and the next day they play in Baltimore, so there's no real travel issues for the owner of the Commanders, who also owns the Devils. And right now he's in a wonderful honeymoon period. He got a pass last year for the 4-win season, came in too late to make changes, and the changes that he's made this year are spinning into gold. So I don't think there are many more popular people in D.C. right now than Josh Harris. Would he show up at that game because it's convenient? He lives in Miami, so it'd be convenient to watch his hockey team open the season. And would he openly root for the Devils if he did that? Or here's a thought. Ted Leonsis, who seems to want to own every team within like 40 miles of here, 50 miles of here, maybe Ted invites him into his box. It's an interesting circumstance because we've never had that here with ownership. We've never had an owner of a local team own other teams. Now, when Jack Kent Cooke was the majority owner of the Redskins, he couldn't operate the team. That's the way the NFL worked in those days. So he had majority financial interest, but he owned the Lakers and he owned the Kings, and he lived in Los Angeles. So it was different, and Edward Bennett Williams ran the team. If Josh Harris, who owns the Devils, is rooting for the Devils the night before his team goes to Baltimore to play the Ravens, I don't know, sets up for just a thought. I don't think it's that big of a deal. And he certainly wouldn't, stand there with like red and blue pom-poms and cheer for the Devils that way. I guess they also have a green jersey. I haven't seen them in a while. So maybe it's just something that it's thinking. All right. So we saw just how bad Deshaun Watson was yesterday. And the stats don't even tell the story of how bad he was. I mean, he ran for 14 yards. This is supposed to be a running quarterback. And he threw for 125. He had a turnover. He was terrible. He's absolutely terrible. There was a play early in the game where it was 4th down. Now they did have 12 men in the huddle, but it looked like Kevin Stefanski wanted to run a play, and Deshaun Watson's coming off the field, and Stefanski throws up his arms like, "What are you doing here?" And Connor Orr of SI.com wrote an interesting column today making the comparison between Jayden Daniels and Deshaun Watson. And his point is that Daniels is what the Browns hoped Watson would be when they made the trade for him. Still young, was he 27, something like that, when they made the deal for him? And he had been terrific in Houston. He had really played well. But looks like everything has caught up with him, including his sordid life off the field with all the lawsuits from the massage therapists. And I think there's another investigation that's going on now with an accusation of sexual impropriety. There's a lot of these things that are swirling around him, and maybe that's all adding up to a quarterback who looks like he's done. He's finished. And as Orr writes in his SI column today, he says, in the second quarter of Sunday's Browns-Commanders game, Jayden Daniels took a critical 4th down snap just inside midfield in a one-score game. He dropped 7 steps from the shotgun, taking a total of 10 yards from the first down marker, and turned to see Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah screaming towards him, totally unblocked. Owusu-Koramoah is one of the fastest hybrid defensive players in the NFL and an excellent open field tackler. But with a shake of Daniels' hips, the Browns linebacker went airborne and sideways, looking a bit like a kid ejected from one of those metal playground carousels. Daniels picked up the first down and kept going, advancing nearly 34 yards past the marker on a play that one could argue rendered the already lifeless Browns out of striking distance. This was generously a 5.5 out of 10 on the ever-expanding Daniels scale of excellence, which not only has him on a crash course with Offensive Rookie of the Year, but also the league's MVP. I mean, this is the talk now. I know it's 5 games, and I know that they have to play another dozen more just in the regular season. I get all that. But he is everything that they could have hoped for and more. Meantime, Watson, and this is one of the problems that you have with a quarterback, is holding on to the ball. And Daniels is one of the better quarterbacks in the league in getting rid of the ball. That's one of the things they worked on in this Cliff Kingsbury offense. But heading into Sunday Night Football, he writes, only 2 quarterbacks in Week 5 held on to the ball longer than Watson on Sunday, who averaged more than 3.2 seconds per dropback. Yeah, that's why they were able to sack him 7 times. He says, the juxtaposition was, I assume, not lost on the Browns, and I wonder if seeing Daniels up close was a reminder of everything they thought they were getting from Watson when they signed him to a fully guaranteed $230 million contract. Cleveland's offense, in terms of yards per play, is the worst of any offense through 5 weeks since 2018, and the game has become more of an offensive-oriented game in those 6 years. It really has. So, you got Jayden Daniels, who's being paid $35 million less per year than Deshaun Watson, who looks like he's erased Albert Hainsworth off the map as the worst contract in NFL history. And then there was this. Before the game yesterday, Adam Kilgore, writing in the Washington Post about Deshaun Watson, he said Watson would be an on-field disaster if he made a minimum salary. Think about that. If he made a minimum salary, he would be an on-field disaster. Well, he'd be benched or cut by now. The Browns enticed him to waive his no-trade clause in an unprecedented guaranteed contract and dealt an arsenal of draft picks to acquire him. Watson will count $73 million against the Browns' salary cap in each of the next 2 seasons, even if they trade or cut him. They have wed themselves to Watson to such an extent that they allowed backup Joe Flacco, the folk hero of their 2023 playoff run, to leave in the offseason so fans would not call for him to replace Watson. Joe Flacco, who at this time last year was sitting on his couch waiting for the phone to ring, Cleveland didn't want to bring him back because they knew if Deshaun Watson stunk like he has now, then everybody would be calling for Flacco to play. Also, Kilgore talks to Chris Sims of NBC, who is very good at analyzing quarterbacks, played in the league. Dad, of course, Phil Sims. And Sims said about Watson, and he studies film, he studies the tape, he watches, what's happening week to week, and he says it's all gone. There's none of that anymore. There's zero. Now it's like, I hope he hits the guy that's wide open. That's where we're at. He says, I think the off-the-field stuff totally ruined him. It's not like riding a bike. I don't think he's lost his feel for the game and his magic a little bit, and I think he's lost his magic as a person. He's not as charismatic. How could he not feel that pressure of what's going on in his personal life? Every time he walks into a room, the whole room is whispering, hey, there's that guy that assaulted all those women. I think that messed up his psyche on the football field. When Sims reviews Watson's game film, he sees a quarterback who has added weight and lost speed. His feel in the pocket, which allowed him to create plays like few quarterbacks, has evaporated. Wow. That, of all the disastrous things that happened under Snyder, and there were plenty of them, at least this didn't happen. I mean, this has Snyder written all over him, over it, but instead it's Jimmy Haslam. So the page has been turned. It's a new era, and not that Snyder has any real sense of himself, but I just wonder, as he sits on his $6 billion that he got for selling the team, I just wonder if he looks over and goes, wow, look at what they did in 2 years, in less than 2 years, in one season and 5 games. And all the things that I tried over those 24 years, most of which blew up in my face, look at what they've done. If he has any sense of that, I don't think he does, but if he has any sense of that, he's got to be looking at this and going, oh, my God, look at that. And, maybe he's such a narcissist that he thinks, oh, well, with what I left behind, sure, they have, great defensive linemen like Jonathan Allen and Payne, and, they have a structure there. Terry McLaurin's a great receiver. We drafted him. No. This is the new regime. This is an organization that's being run like a professional organization. And if it was run that way 6 or 7 years ago, Kirk Cousins would still be a commander until they found someone to take his place. But instead, they went through like 11 or 12 different quarterbacks until we got to this. Speaking of Cousins, he went on the Dan Patrick Show on Friday off his great overtime victory over Tampa on Thursday night, which they won 36-30. And this is the clean-cut Kirk. He is he's the Ozzie Nelson, if you're old enough to remember that, or the Ward Cleaver of coaches, of quarterbacks. And so he came on the Dan Patrick Show, but listen to where he was when he did the Zoom interview.
We had the day off, and I got up and asked my son Cooper what he wanted to do. He wanted to go to Waffle House. So we're sitting here in a Waffle House parking lot about to go have some breakfast together. Cooper's in the back seat. Cooper, you want to wave and say hello? But we'll be
hey, Coop.
We'll be headed to Waffle House after this interview.
When did Cooper realize Dad won the game last night?
Cooper went to bed in the fourth quarter. Cooper's 7, and it was a dream of mine that I'd play long enough for my boys, my two boys, 7 and 5, that they would be old enough to really get into it, really follow it. I talked to my wife after the game. She said, Cooper went to bed in the fourth quarter. He said he can't stay up, and Turner stayed up, but he really just stayed up because he didn't want to go to bed, and he has no idea what's going on. So, Dan, I got to play a few more years so these guys can really be a part of it.
Okay, but what's that like, that highest of highs? You're dancing after the game. It's overtime. You throw for 500 yards, and then you get in your car and you go home.
Yeah. Yeah, I was driving by myself, at 1:30 in the morning on Highway 85 back to my house, and, Atlanta's pretty quiet that time of night, and life goes on. You certainly enjoy the moment, and certainly today and this weekend feels great after a win and a good performance. But you also know that Monday's coming, and it's time to get ready for the next opponent, and that's how this league works.
What was it like when you went into the huddle in overtime?
There was a lot of belief on the sideline, probably more belief than I had about, hey, we won the toss. Let's go down and get a touchdown and just end it. The defense and just guys in the team were saying, hey, we score, we win. And I thought, well, you guys are acting like it's easy to just go down and get a touchdown, but okay. And, sure enough, that's what we did. And we didn't really even have to put it back in Tampa's hands.
Do you have to go over overtime rules with your teammates?
There was a quick review. I mean, you have time, right? I mean, when Koo makes the kick to send us to overtime, you have a few minutes with the TV timeout and things to kind of gather your thoughts. And the main point was, hey, it's only 10 minutes. This is not a 15-minute quarter. It can end in a tie. 10 minutes is going to go fast. It may only be 2 possessions, 1 for each team. And, let's make the most of our first shot we get. And then so glad we won the toss. And then we all reminded each other, if we score a touchdown, it's a walk-off. It's game over.
Okay, but, you got Pitts in London. Those are the go-to guys. When do you realize you're going to go to a guy who has one other catch this year?
Yeah, Drake got hurt on the play before, had to come out. So Goodell had been coming in all game long when Drake needed a blow. So he's subbed in like he had been for the whole game. And I just go out, read out the play, and it was man coverage. And Kadero's route versus man coverage is not a winning route, but the corner was off enough that I thought, you know what? Against my better judgment, I'm just going to drive this ball into him and not progress. And it was tight. We found a way to complete it. And then from there, it was just all individual effort and other guys blocking for him to be able to pull through and pull away.
He's Mr. Primetime, Kirk Cousins, joining us from a Waffle House parking lot. Give me that mindset, that thought process. You're going to get hit. You got to take the hit, but you also have to throw the ball. What is that feeling like for all of us who will never want to or will be able to experience that?
As long as there's a place to put the football, that's all I'm thinking about is where's the completion? Can I throw it with conviction? Know where it's got to go. Everything else doesn't really enter my mind or bother me. It's when you feel like you're about to get hit and you don't have a place to go with the football. That's when I feel pretty uncomfortable and unsettled. So, I love it. I love being able to chuck and duck and kind of make those plays where you have to anticipate and find that completion and you're picking yourself up off the turf. But it's when you're just throwing the ball to nobody to throw it away that's when you get kind of frustrated.
How's the Achilles?
Yeah, it's coming along. It was good last night. I think more than the Achilles for me has been playing fast. I don't think the first couple weeks I played fast with my eyes, with my reads, with my anticipation, with my confidence in where guys were going and how to trust them. And I think each week it improved. And then last night, I just felt like I was starting to be my old self, anticipate things, play fast. And I think that was encouraging. And I noticed that in the second quarter. And I, when you can do that, it's when it gets fun.
Okay, explain that, playing fast.
Well, I think like I was hot at one point, and Kyle Pitts had a route to the flat, and the defensive end dropped, and Kyle hasn't really broken to the flat, but I know I've got to get rid of the football, and so I just throw it to the flat. Really, what feels like to me, I'm throwing it to nobody. I'm just throwing it to air. But there's a trust that Kyle's eventually going to put his left foot in the ground and break to the flat and hopefully meet the ball. So I just threw it, and sure enough, Kyle rips out of the cut and makes the catch. And I thought, see, that's a ball that against Pittsburgh or against Philly, I was throwing, either leaving it inside or I was, throwing it into the ground or I was throwing it too far away. I wasn't just throwing it with conviction and trusting that Kyle was going to be there. So there were a couple others to Drake on some option routes where, I was late the first few weeks, and I felt like last night I was a little faster in my decision-making to just rip it to him and let him go make a play.
Your longest run of the season so far is?
I don't even know. The one last night that bothered me was late in the game, probably third quarter. I progressed and drove a ball into Ray McLeod when he was completely covered, and the season just parted, and I just need to take off and run. And that really has nothing to do with my Achilles, more just it's got to hit my brain that, hey, the sea's parted, take off and run. You don't have to always be a pocket passer. And that's where I want to always be looking to improve. Is it's great to throw for a lot of yards and have production in the pass game, but every now and then to go steal a few with my legs would really help our offense. I thought that's what Baker did really well last night. Was he stole some plays with his legs at times when he could.
Your longest run is 1 yard so far.
That doesn't surprise me.
That can't even be described as a run. Like that's just
that
1
doesn't
yard.
surprise me.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me.
You could fall forward and get 1 yard. That's not a run.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So yeah, there's more meat on the bone there, Dan.
Let's keep the meat on the bone. That's the problem with you.
You got to keep our tendons together.
Yeah, the Achilles tendon. And if you watch the game on Thursday night, they showed he's still having trouble pushing off the right foot where the Achilles tear happened. So he may get a lot better as the season goes on. They brought him in because they've been looking for that veteran quarterback for a while, and right now they're 3-2. They're winning these wild games. They'd won the week before on a field goal at the gun. They win this game in overtime. And they set that up with a great play at the end of overtime with Kukic and a field goal. But this is an interesting team, and Kirk Cousins at this stage of his career is very interesting to see. Now, he's got a history, and we saw it here. In big moments, he tended to cough it up. He fumbled or he'd throw an interception, and it looked like last year he was having his best season in Minnesota when he tore his Achilles. And it's an odd situation in Atlanta for sure. They took Michael Penix in the first round, but they're content to have him sit as long as Kirk plays the way he's playing right now and improving week by week as he did last week against Tampa. So there's where Kirk is. I think at this point, you take him in Atlanta and you take Jayden Daniels here. But in between, there was a long period of time where you looked over at him in Minnesota and said, if you still had him, you might be a decent team. But once again, Dan Snyder messed that one up with his boy Bruce Allen. And here we are after wandering in the desert with finally a football team you can feel good about. Coming up in the next hour, more on the incredible rise of Jayden Daniels and also some really cool Green Bay stories about what a quaint little town and how it is really an incredible story in sports. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Maybe if there was something called television when he made his debut in 1937, maybe if there was something called social media, there might have been this sensation around Sammy Baugh. But there has been absolutely nothing regarding a rookie quarterback, even 2012 with RG3, like we're seeing right now with Jayden Daniels. This is incredible. He's not only being touted for Rookie of the Year, there's discussion that he could win the MVP. Last player as a rookie to win the MVP, Jim Brown. Jim Brown is the last one to do it in the 1950s, and you could still make a case that Jim Brown was the greatest football player who ever played. Yeah, it's almost out of control right now, and if this keeps going, God knows. I mean, we've got next week, they're going to Baltimore, 6.5-point underdogs. If they win there, they're 5-1. And then they come home for what will be an incredibly hyped game against the Chicago Bears because you're going to have the 1 and 2 quarterbacks playing there. Caleb Williams, who's starting to click for the Bears, and Jayden Daniels, who's the talk of the NFL. And I do remember the last 7-1 start. Yes, I do. It was in 1996. There had been kind of a phony baloney quarterback battle. Gus Frerotte, who had been a 7th rounder in 1994 when they took Heath Schuler, number 3 overall, and they were trying to make Heath Schuler a quarterback, but after 2 years, it was pretty clear, even though he won a game at Dallas, he wasn't going to be the answer. So they had a quarterback competition in camp. It wasn't close if you watched the exhibition season, and Gus Frerotte won. And they started off that year with a loss at home to Philadelphia. But then they reeled off 7 straight wins. And it was like, wow, Gus Frerotte, look at that. And again, this is before Tom Brady ever became Tom Brady, he was like buried on the depth chart at Michigan at that point. He wasn't even playing at all at Michigan, and they're 7-1 with Gus Frerotte. And I remember this well. Darryl Green, Hall of Famer, 2 Super Bowl rings at that point, had played in 3 Super Bowls, said, "We're not that good. We're not that good." And they weren't. They got their doors blown off at Buffalo, and then they had a good chance to beat Arizona. And they were way out in front, and somehow Boomer Esiason brought them back, threw for over 500 yards. They won in overtime. But even still, they went to Philadelphia the following week. They were 8-3. 8-3. They lost 7 of their last 8. They finished 9-7 and out of the playoffs. That's not going to happen, I don't think, with this team. And the 4-1 matches the best start of the Dan Snyder era, which was with Jim Zorn in 2008. And at the time, I was working with John Riggins, who kept saying, not that good, not that good. And they weren't that good. They finished 8-8. But there's something going on here that feels a lot different than that 7-1 and that 4-1. A hell of a lot different. And what Jayden Daniels is doing is probably the best rookie quarterbacking performance for this team, maybe since Sammy Baugh. And Sammy Baugh went on to win the world championship in 1937. The league was a lot different then, a lot more primitive than it is now. But why not dream, right? Why not? As Barry Zerluga concluded his column today, let me just read you what he wrote in the last line of his column. And you can look at it, and maybe we'll look back on it and say that's kind of silly. But he said, Jayden Daniels is changing it all in Washington. The realities are different. The expectations are loftier. The possibilities, who knows? Who knows? And after the game yesterday, Dan Quinn thanked the home crowd, which was a true home crowd. They had 59,000 people, and it seemed that most of them were wearing burgundy, many of them wearing Jayden Daniels number 5s. And have caught on to what is also going through the team, and that is an incredible buzz and an incredible shot of adrenaline, what they're getting from number 5. Among the questions yesterday to Quinn.
When Jayden makes a play on the move and throws the ball 60 yards downfield or drops it in a bucket to Diami, what is the impact on that, on the defense?
Yes. Yeah, it can be demoralizing, because all of a sudden you're created some long yardage scenarios, just what I was referring to on the third downs. And so to have a big shot, to even when the person's guarded well, to put it in the only spot it could go, the play that comes to mind before today was the one to Terry at the end of the Cincinnati game, where there was only really one spot that you could throw that pass. And he had a couple of those scenarios today. And I thought, quite honestly, it was a grimy start for the offense. It didn't go good. And I had told him inside, sometimes you learn as much from that start as you do from the 27 for 29, because different ways. But at the end, what I can tell you is, like, he processes quickly. All right, this is how they're going to go, then this is how we're going to go play. And so you learn from those as well. And I'd much prefer lessons and learning after winning. I can tell you that. But all of its information, and he's such a remarkable competitor that he does learn.
Grimy start. You heard Quinn say, grimy start. When you lead a team to a victory like that, when you blow the doors off the Browns and you spend the fourth quarter chilling because there's no need for you to play anymore, and they play Marcus Mariota, some quarterbacks might say, well, what do you mean grimy? No. Daniels accountable for everything.
We got to be better, and that starts with me. That starts with the whole team. We got to hold ourselves to a high standard, take accountability. But, man, it just says that we're going to fight, and we're going to be able to battle through adversity no matter wins or losses. We're not going to give up or anything like that.
Here's the thing that I really found impressive about the touchdown pass to Diami Brown, and that was just a beautifully thrown ball. He put it in the place where only Diami Brown could catch it. He had plenty of room in that corner of the end zone to haul it in. And in many ways, that cemented the game. That 41-yard pass to a guy who really wasn't even supposed to be playing. Noah Brown has won the number 2 job, but Noah Brown was out with a hamstring injury. So remember in camp when we were like going, wait a minute, Jahan Dotson was a first-round pick. Isn't he the number 2? And you kept hearing Dan Quinn compliment De'Ami Brown. Well, De'Ami Brown certainly proved his worth yesterday, but more importantly, this is what I found just absolutely impressive about Daniels. Listen to how he describes how that touchdown pass came about.
I ran out of bounds of the play before, and then kind of seen some in the defense. I seen they were playing man coverage, and I was turning back around, said, man, let's take a shot to Cliff, and he called the play, and we did it.
Yeah, he runs out of bounds. This is the play before, and he looks and he goes, just as he's passing Cliff on the sidelines, just say, hey, we ought to take a deep shot. They're in man. Boom. They call the play. Next play, touchdown, and off she wrote. Off they went. I mean, just absolutely mind-blowing. More from Quinn, and this is about the Jayden Daniels learning curve. Now, he did run 11 times yesterday, but the 11 times he ran seemed a lot different than the 16 that he did in Tampa in the opener. And this is Quinn explaining the learning curve and how quickly it's going for Jalen.
One of the things that I really appreciate about Jayden is like his ability to learn and process quickly. And so on the first game, the narrative was too many runs and this. And so, like, yeah, he knew that. But, like, now that you're going into finding different ways to do that, when to get out of bounds, when to slide, when to remain a passer, to take your shots. And now the defenders can no longer come up. You've got to stay back in coverage because now there's certainly a dual threat. So I just love the way that he's growing. He really puts the work in. That's why so many of the teammates, have such high regard for him.
Yeah, you want to hear more on that, about the respect for Jayden Daniels? Frankie Louvu, who got a game ball as defensive player of the game for Washington with 2.5 sacks and also a recovery of a fumble. This is what he says about how they feed off of what Jayden Daniels has shown them in this very short period of time.
We know what Jayden put in all week. You know what I mean? The kid shows up at 4 a.m., man, he's already lifting in there. Me and Bobby walk in like at 5, 6. Like, dude is already done with his film tape. He's done with his lift. Like, he's already a step ahead. So, like, to see that and what he does on Sundays is not, like, shocking. You know what I mean? So, it is to the world because, like, the dude put in a week of work in a week. So, it's the law of compensation, man. What you put in is what you're going to get out. And, for him to do what he does, man, it fires us up and, just have us get going.
Leadership as a rookie, and there's no shortcuts. I don't know if he's there at 4 a.m., but he's been saying he's been there at 5, and here's confirmation from a teammate who also gets in there early that he's putting the work in. And you keep hearing that from coaches, players. He's there. There's nothing phony about him. Even when RG3 was doing his thing, there was a lot of stuff going on that made you say, there's something here that's not entirely real. And the way he basked in the attention, putting his wedding registry up on Twitter and reposting things where people said nice things. This guy is like, even when he makes a mistake, even when he had that interception, and that was a rookie mistake that he made in the first quarter, comes off the field smiling because he learned what he did and he's ready to come back. I mean, this is what you heard all week, by the way, too. Historic start. He's completing 82% of his passes. No quarterback has ever done that over a 4-game stretch ever. And the veteran said, yes, I mean, it's very impressive. And, we'll see how he responds to adversity, but there's no sign that he won't be able to handle it. Well, comes right back. Defense did their part. They flipped the field on a short field, and then he comes back and delivers the touchdown run to Robinson, who wasn't even supposed to play. I mean, he was out all week from practice with a knee injury, and Brian Robinson comes in and delivers one of 2 touchdowns on the game. They were even able to rest him in the second half because they didn't even need him after he'd done the damage. This is Chris Long, who won a couple of Super Bowls, one with the Patriots and one with the Eagles, played about 11, 12 years in the NFL, now does the podcast and makes regular appearances on the Rich Eisen Show. This was last week before Sunday's game, but what he had seen at that point in 4 games from Jayden Daniels and how he was ready to say, basically rip up the receipt.
He's absolutely real. I don't know how good the team is, but he's real.
Oh, he is real. Because again, you're seeing it rhythm, right? You're seeing smart decisions. You're seeing good coaching and excellent execution by a young'un who is 100% grown up. The throws he makes, the decisions he makes, I just hope he doesn't have a moment where he kind of loses his sense of self-protection. You know, like that could be a troubling moment. You know, and he had one of them against the Giants, and we had Dan Quinn on. And he definitely said he spoke to him about that self-preservation aspect of it, Chris.
Yeah, I think like he's got to toe the line between it's funny that he's doing it in Washington where the last guy who was so talented there in RG3, and I'm not going to compare the two because they're different players, but one thing they both have is an element of play extension and quarterback run game, and they're both wiry, you know, and I think that's the thing about Jayden. Everybody's like, oh, you're skinny, I don't want you to run, but like, don't lose that. Like, don't lose the pocket presence, the ability early in a down to say, hey, there's not going to be anything open in this look. Like, maybe they're manned up, maybe everybody's running this way, and I can pick up an easy 3 and skirt out of bounds. Like, my thing is learn how to fall, learn how to get out of bounds, and learn to pass up the big hit. Like, I think Lamar does a really good job of that, actually, as a running quarterback. I always say this, I don't see Lamar get burped a lot. And by burped, I mean, like, is he getting up? You know? Jayden Daniels is a guy who the quarterback run for him is not the main focus because this guy's throwing the laces off the pigskin. But when you have a guy who's calm and collected on early downs, and he can hit the big throws on third down, and he can run the football, like, you really do have a guy with a full menu who stresses you. And I feel like watching this team, they're never behind the sticks right now. And that's a testament to Cliff Kingsbury, who, I mean, Jared Goff had a great night last night. You remember the whole "you're good enough for Detroit" thing?
Yep.
You know, that took a couple years to hear that. Cliff got that "you're good enough for Washington" speech after the game a month into the season. So while it might be Jayden Daniels that's the straw that stirs the drink, like having a coordinator, hey, listen, I think Caleb Williams could be pretty good watching his tape, but we're not going to find out with this guy calling plays, you know? So there is something to be said for having a coordinator like that who was a bit of a distressed asset himself. Like, people were like, well, you're the reason Kyler Murray didn't work out. And as the season starts and Kyler Murray looks damn good with Petzing down there, Cliff's going to the desert, and you want to see if he was the reason, and you want to see if this kid's real, and he's absolutely real. Their efficiency on second down is up near the top of the league. So I was looking at like first, second, and third down to figure out why they seem like they're always ahead of the sticks. Not only are they one of the most efficient teams on second down, I think the delta between them and the second best team in EPA on third down is like enormous.
Yeah, well, look, third downs yesterday, you got to credit the defense with this as well. But Cleveland yesterday was 1 for 13 on third downs. Remember how the defense couldn't get anybody off the field? 1 for 13. Washington, 8 of 17, and a lot of those were short third down situations. And the weapon that Jayden Daniels is, once he gets outside the pocket, he can either throw or he can run. And if he starts to run, he's not trying to squeeze in that extra 2 yards. He's going out of bounds. He's learning to protect himself. And, yes, the relationship that he's got with Cliff Kingsbury is a big part of the picture. And Kingsbury may be one of those guys, although I think after this year, with the importance of quarterbacks, he's going to get a head coaching job. Somebody's going to give it to him. But he may be best suited for this. And if this can stay for another few years, wow, look out, because they really got something going on here. One other thing on the feel good on this, and I've spent over 30 years on the air here, mostly wringing my hands about the circumstances of this football team. But I got to look at this and say that things are right now pointing so far up that it's very hard to come up with negatives. It really is. And I remember last year on his way out the door, kind of, where Ron Rivera was, saying, well, he didn't say it in these words, but the message was, yeah, we didn't win a lot of games, but I changed the culture here. He didn't change the culture. The culture has changed this year. Winning's got a lot to do with this. But realize, Sam Cosmi has been here. This is his 4th year. He played 3 years under Ron Rivera. He understands that the culture that they were beating their chest about, that Rivera was talking about, that never existed. This is culture.
I didn't really understand culture. I haven't been a part of a quote-unquote good culture. This year, I'm slowly but surely, I see it. It's really cool to see, to be a part of talking and acting on it. So, I'm excited about that. I just, as a team, I'm interested in seeing how we, go against adversity when adversity hits us. We've been doing a really good job, obviously leading ahead, but we can't sleep on that. We just got to keep working, keep coming, and not get complacent. That's a huge thing right now.
Oh, the old one at a time. And there has not been anybody on this team that I've heard talk about long-term speculation. The one thing Quinn has been able to do is keep them focused on game to game. And right now, Baltimore is coming up. In fact, Austin Eckler said that in the locker room. He says they don't spend any time looking ahead. It's only the next game. And so after yesterday, now they can talk about Baltimore, which comes up on Sunday. They wanted to, NBC wanted to flex this game. They wanted to have it on Sunday night, and CBS said no. It's still 1 o'clock, but they're sending the A-team. So it's going to be Nance, and it's going to be, the rest of Romo and Tracy Wolfson. They're going to be in Baltimore for this. But, who'd have thought when you looked at the schedule, a rookie quarterback going against an MVP, that this would be, kind of a toe-to-toe heavyweight type of thing. But that's what it's shaping up as, even though the Ravens are favored by 6.5. All right, 40 years ago today, Walter Payton ran past Jim Brown. We'll look back at that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We got Bram coming up at 11 o'clock today. We also have baseball on the radio, which is cool. We got the 2 playoff games today, both the home teams looking to go 2-0 with Cleveland hosting Detroit. That'll be at 4 o'clock here on ESPN 630. And then tonight, 7:30 start, got the Yankees playing Kansas City as the Yankees took the first game and Cleveland took the second. And we just had a wild game yesterday between Philadelphia and the Mets as Phillies was down 6-0 and they won on a walk-off. And then last night, they had some fans throwing a bunch of garbage on the field as the Dodgers got clobbered by the Padres. Opening game, they get the home run from Ohtani. They look like they're going to sweep through this. And last night, big win for the Padres. So you get those 2 series now even at a game apiece. And we'll see what happens tonight in the 2 American League series. All right. It was 40 years ago today that Jim Brown's record, which had stood at that point for 19 years, was broken. And it was broken by the great Walter Payton, who was playing. The Bears were playing against the New Orleans Saints. It was the season before they had their spectacular defensive team, the 85 Bears, but they were coming. You could see. And as a matter of fact, that season at the end of the year, they played Washington at RFK Stadium. And Washington had, I believe they had won the division that year, but they got to host the game. They were playing a Steve Fuller quarterback Bears team. Jim McMahon was hurt again, but Payton threw a touchdown pass in that game, and you could see the defense was starting to scare the hell out of everybody because Joe Gibbs, who had never used the shotgun before, used it. But Rick Donnelly, who was playing center in place of the injured Jeff Bostic, snapped it over Theismann's head, and they never used it again. But this was a very good Bears team on the come, and they're playing the New Orleans Saints, and this is what happened as Payton was closing in on a record that many thought wouldn't be broken, even though Jim Brown had only played 9 years in the NFL. He led the league in rushing, I think, 8 of those. He left as the MVP of the league in 1965. Talk about leaving something behind. But he had just been that good and that dominant. But here came Walter Payton in 1984 with this.
Second play of the second half on the 21-yard line. Walter needs 2 to break the record. I formation. Wing to the right is McKinnon. Galt wide to the left. They send McKinnon in motion through to the left side. Quick pitch to Walter. Looking for the record. Cuts back. He's got it. He's out of it at 25 to the 26-yard line. Walter Payton becomes the National Football League all-time leading rusher, surpassing Jim Brown on his second carry here in the second half. And that's the equivalent to Hank Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's all-time home run record. And listen to the standing ovation.
Yeah, the Bears won the game 20-7. Payton 154 yards. He finished the day with 12,400, going past the 12,312 that Jim Brown had in his 9-year career. This was Payton's 10th year. He retired after the 1987 season. In fact, his last game was a playoff game against Washington. He ran for 16,726 yards and almost 15 years to the day, November 1st of 1999, 15 years to the day after he passed the record of Jim Brown. He passed away of cancer. And just looking at the all-time numbers, Emmitt Smith is number one with 18,355 yards. Payton is number two with 16,726. Frank Gore, who played, I believe, it wasn't 20 years, but maybe it was like 18 years in the NFL. He finished with 16,000 yards exactly. And here's the one where you look at these numbers and you say, what if? And you might say that with Jim Brown. Jim Brown played only 9 years, and he's a little further down the list now. Started out in the first few years of his career, he only played 12 games a year. By the time he left, it was 14, but just didn't play that many games, but he was that dominant. So Barry Sanders, who played 10 years and really was never hurt, didn't leave because of injury. Barry Sanders ran for 15,269. So he was roughly only 3,000 behind Emmitt. And Emmitt played 15 years, played 5 years longer. Now, it was kind of a shame that he finished up his career playing for Arizona for 2 years. And even in his last couple of years in Dallas, it was like, let's get this record out of the way so we can get him out of here. But Barry Sanders left with, whoa. What are you leaving now for? Now, some of it was the team he played on. It was a really bad team. But if you look at that number, 15,269, and say, let's say he gets 1,000, let's say he gets 1,200 yards. I mean, he would have gone past that in like 3 years, maybe 2.5 easily. But he left behind, and that is always part of the legacy of Barry Sanders, that what if he had played long? Not that, it's funny, too, with the rushing total. Everybody knows that Emmitt Smith is the NFL's all-time leading rusher. I don't think most people could tell you he had 18,355 yards. I think that's the big difference in football. We may know who's number one, but although, even though Tom Brady's got most of the records, nobody knows his passing yardage total. Aaron Rodgers, I think yesterday went like to 60,000 yards. He's got like 80,000 yards, but nobody really knows the number. That's the thing. So while this was a big milestone going past Jim Brown, because at the time, this is pre-Jerry Rice, where maybe you make the argument Jerry Rice is the best, or maybe you make the argument that Tom Brady's the best because he's got the most rings. Most people had acknowledged at that point that Jim Brown was the best to ever play the game. And so Walter Payton, who was great in his own right, but maybe not thought of at the same level of Jim Brown, he goes past his record, and that's a pretty big deal. He got a call from Ronald Reagan after the game, and then he was here's the time and place. You think of 1984, Reagan's running for re-election, right? It's October of 84. He was actually on the plane on Air Force One when he made the call. The technology was in place then where he could make a call from the plane. He was flying to Louisville for a debate with Walter Mondale that night. So 40 years ago today, Walter Payton goes past Jim Brown. All right, Bram is coming up next. Tony's at 2 o'clock in between Greeny. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.